When people hear that I grew up watching American television and movies, they assumed it was something that's secret or illegal that I was constantly doing. And it's true, but there was a time when I was too young to learn how to use a VPN to jump over the Great Firewall. And that's when I watched American TV shows that are state approved, dubbed in Mandarin, and shown openly to the public in China. Today, I want to talk about what those shows are, well, some of them, and why they were handpicked by the Chinese Communist Party, as well as how they shaped my early impression of the United States and the American people. If you're new here, my name is Lu. I was born and raised in China. I grew up in the 90s. This is arguably the most open period of modern China. And don't get me wrong, it was still very authoritarian. There was a lot of oppression. It was kind of horrible. But it was a time when the Chinese Communist Party kind of was testing the waters and allowed controlled but limited foreign content. So this period didn't last long, but many of my peers in China, including myself, were there to witness. So the first show I want to talk about is Growing Pains. What's interesting is that when I talk to people my age in Canada or the US, most of them have never seen the show before. I think there was a delay in what we were shown. So American TV shows often reached us about a decade later. And I still remember the theme song. Show me that smile again. When I was a little girl in China and I was sitting around the table with my family and we would be watching The Growing Pains. So apparently this show is very much apolitical, it's family-based. And one of the things that I learned that was very kind of stood out to me was, children spoke freely. The family dynamic was just so different. I don't know if you guys know this, but in a very traditional Chinese family, like in China, a Chinese family in China, there's often a strict hierarchy. I'm not trying to generalize, I'm not saying everybody had that kind of upbringing, but I think on a large scale, it does hold up, There's a great emphasis of being obedient. You must sacrifice your own will to satisfy your parents' needs, and that is something to be praised for. I don't know if you guys know the word in Chinese. It's called 孝顺. It's like being in our culture for thousands of years. I'm not trying to say that that's right. Just because something has been there for thousands of years doesn't mean that it is right. But that is true to a lot of traditional Chinese families. So when I was watching Growing Pains, there were scenes where they were fighting and they were trying to ask each other's opinions on something. And that was very just eye-opening to me. And I was like, what? That is how family members talk? I remember that was something very interesting to me.
他终于想读书了。我为什么不把我的车借给他呢？
And speaking of apolitical TV shows, the second show that I was going to show you is a show called Power Rangers. This is an interesting one because when I talk to people my age in Canada and the US, they often have seen it. And it has become this weird point of connection for me after I immigrated. I would talk to people about Power Rangers and we would have a nice chat after that. And at the time when I was growing up, we were just, as a nation, reviving from the Cultural Revolution and the Great Famine. We were kind of in a cultural desert in a way. So there wasn't a lot of domestic TV shows for children. So naturally, a lot of local stations kind of imported Power Rangers, and it was obviously dubbed. Okay, the third show is The Lost World. Again, this is another example of how American TV shows kind of reached us 10 years late because I think people my age in the West, in Canada or the US, or, they probably have never watched this show before. It's such an ancient show. It was aired on national television in China. It was everywhere, and obviously was dubbed.
要不是他去过北美，我敢肯定他也不会相信地球是圆的。
For those of you who have never heard of this show, this is loosely based on a novel, I think written by Conan Doyle. It's about dinosaurs and scientists, and it's a fantasy and adventure. Again, very apolitical, as you can see here. These are Western stories without Western systems or Western values. As I got older, the media landscape changed as well. This is when Chinese streaming platforms emerged. People weren't satisfied with the old, dusty release of foreign content anymore. We had our own version of Netflix. This short burst of foreign content didn't last long, but before that, there was a burst, and I was at the right age to see all these shows. So this was when I got to watch a large number of American TV shows. And in my humble opinion, the best one of them is The Good Wife. For those of you who haven't heard of the show, it's very much a political show, contrary to all the shows that I've mentioned above. I learned a lot about the American politics and the American institutions and your legal system. I learned a lot from that show. And these shows weren't promoted in any way. They were, in a way, tolerated, along with another TV show, The House of Cards. These shows are often super critical of the American government. We often learn a lot about the corruption, nepotism, or just everything that's bad about the American government in a fictional way. So, most of us growing up believing that the Chinese government is so much better, so much superior. And the reason I wanted to sort of single out The Good Wife is because, I don't know if you guys know this, it has a spin-off show called The Good Fight. And that show was never aired in China. By the way, The Good Wife was also banned from China, I think, in 2014. Anyways, The Good Fight. So this show was never aired in China, and somehow the Chinese Communist Party has managed to reach their long arm into this show and caused the producers of this show to self-censor.
CBS's The Good Wife spin-off show, The Good Fight, had to cut out a 90-second song called Banned in China where they made fun of crazy Chinese censorship policies.
And so it's very ironic. I remember that specific episode, you just see this episode was censored by the Chinese Communist Party or something like that. And I remember I was watching that outside China, and I just had a moment. I was like, oh my God, they're so powerful that they're not only controlling what the Chinese people can see in China, they're also controlling what American people and all the people outside China, what they can and cannot watch. And what you end up with is a TV show that is still very much critical of the American government, but says nothing bad about the Chinese government, even if you live outside China. This is the reality that we live in right now. I want to end this video with a movie that still haunts me till this day. I watched this movie when I was about 6 or 7 years old as part of kind of like a school project. So I remember my whole class was taken to a theater, which was pretty fancy at the time. This is a movie about how Chinese Americans, Chinese immigrants in the United States, how they've been wronged by the system, so much so that they couldn't reunite with their family members. The father, who was supposed to be this very good traditional Chinese father, was forced to be separated from his own child. It was a heartbreaking story. Looking back, that movie really didn't make much sense. It wasn't that convincing, but it was sad. And I think it triggered an an emotion from us, and it triggered fear, it triggered sadness and anger towards the foreign government, towards the American government. And the theme was very simple, do not immigrate to the United States. Do not go somewhere else because you won't have a good life there. It's gonna suck for you. And I know for a fact this movie is still being shown to children in this way, like sort of mandatory by teachers all across the country till this day.
Mrs. Zhu, please remember, after Dennis returns home, if we discover that your husband has been at your house or any other place where Dennis is present, the police will arrest him.